The millionaire was afraid that the homeless man could poison his disabled daughter. But what happened shocked everyone. Eduardo Álvarez is an influential businessman, a man accustomed to controlling everything, from stock quotes to people's destinies. Everything except one thing, the life of his own daughter. The corridors of the Swiss clinic in Zurich smelled of sterility, fear, and money, in that order. The snow-white walls behind which the entire floor he rented was hidden seemed too clean. They absorbed not only dust but also the remnants of hope. The doctor came out of the room and nodded almost imperceptibly. No change. The same indicators. The same gloomy forecasts. The girl's life was melting like a candle in a draft, and even the most expensive winds could not fan its flame. He did not say it out loud, and there was no need. Eduardo could read faces better than any papers, and this is what made him a legend in the world of investments. He knew the price of everything except his own helplessness. His daughter, Isadora, was only 7. She had been silent for almost 2 years. A destroyed nervous system, a destroyed immune system. Her body had become a lock in which all the doors were jammed. Eduardo hired the best doctors, spent hundreds of thousands of euros every month, took her to clinics in Boston, Israel, Japan. Stem cells, neurostimulators, pressure chambers, all in vain. The girl was still lying in her room, and he was sitting by the window and watching the gardeners trim the perfect hedge. Everything was on schedule. Everything was under control. Everything, except for the reflection in the mirror, in which empty, tired eyes looked. Returning home to Sao Paulo, he again tried to find a solution. He hired a new European consultant, a nutritionist, bought another innovative device. But again, zero result. One morning, walking along the alley near the house, he noticed something strange. A boy was scurrying about in the bushes by the wall, separating his luxurious garden from the wasteland. He was skinny, in a worn-out jacket, with a backpack next to him. Eduardo stopped. The boy didn't notice him. Taking a small container with something hot from his bag, he slipped through a crack in the fence and disappeared behind the pavilion. The guards arrived a couple of minutes later, but it was too late. The cameras didn't record anything unusual. It wasn't until the evening that Eduardo realized where the boy had disappeared to. There was a plate of warm rice and vegetables by his daughter's bed. "Who brought this?" he asked the nurse. "I thought you ordered it." She was surprised. The girl suddenly wanted to eat. We were shocked. Isadora ate everything and smiled for the first time in a long time. The next morning, Eduardo got up earlier than usual and hid in the pavilion. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he had a gut feeling that today logic would give way to something ancient and powerful. And he was right. The boy returned. He carefully slipped through a crack in the fence, carrying an old thermos in his hands. Thick soup. He moved as if he were entering a temple. When Eduardo stepped out of the shadow of the column, the child was scared and wanted to run away. But the man grabbed him by the shoulder. "Who are you? I'm Lucas." "I'm sorry, I'm not a thief. It's just..." She was crying. I saw it. Grandma said, "Give her something to eat." Estella. The name echoed in Eduardo's memory. The old woman who lived on the slope where the slums began. He had always considered her part of folklore, an old legend. "Don't come here again," he said sternly, looking at the thermos. "What's in it?" "Chicken soup with arrowroot and guac." Grandma says, "It's not just food, it's strength. For the heart." That night, Isadora ate again and fell asleep, without seizures. And in the morning, Eduardo went where he had never gone before, along the path that led to the house of a woman he considered a nobody. She opened the door, unsurprised. "You want to heal the body, and I want to heal the child." He fell silent. For the first time in his life, he didn't know what to say. "It's not her body that hurts, it's her soul," Estella continued. "She doesn't need treatment, she needs love." That evening, Lucas came again, wearing a white Panama hat, too big, slipping down over his eyes. He wasn't just going to the mansion, he was going to where they were waiting for him. "You're stubborn," Eduardo said. "That's good." "I just heard her crying," Lucas whispered. "And Grandma says, food is touch. It's memory. It's home." Eduardo wanted to brush it off. Chemistry, biology, statistics. But statistics didn't explain his daughter's smile after eating, and he let Lucas in. Isadora didn't turn away. She sat up and picked up a spoon. She likes it, Lucas said. It's dark in her body, and food is light. Eduardo restrained himself, but something inside him trembled. He was reading a fairy tale to his daughter, and her lips trembled. Patricia called from Geneva, demanding reports. What new therapy? He was silent. How could he explain that soup cooked by an unlicensed woman changes everything? A couple of days later, Lucas brought a flower in a pot. It's mint, special, to make dreams softer. Dreams? Eduardo grinned. Are you serious? And how long has it been since you slept without nightmares? The answer was discouraging. That night, Eduardo himself went to Estella. The house smelled of dried herbs. I don't believe in miracles, he began, and a child doesn't feel numbers. Her soul wants to be loved, she said. He couldn't argue. What should I do? Be close, eat together, read to her, not reports, but stories. I don't give guarantees, but I believe in love. Why do you help? He asked. Because someone once helped me. She smiled. If you save even one soul, you have not lived in vain. From that day on, he became different. Not suddenly, not abruptly. Slowly. He fed Isadora himself, drank tea from guava leaves, listened to her breathing. One day she touched his hand. Not as a patient, as a daughter. Lucas came every day with food, with drawings, with stories, and Eduardo sat with Estella more and more often, cleaned herbs, washed the arrowroot. He learned to live. You don't heal your daughter, she said one day. You learn to be close, and that's where the healing lies. He opened the back of the garden. There was a helicopter pad there. He ordered the concrete to be dug up and the greenery to be sown. You're building a village in your home, Patricia screamed. You'll lose everything. And if she survives, he answered quietly. Scandals erupted in the press. His name was dragged through the mud. Contracts fell through. Funds froze. But at that very moment, Isadora turned to him, touched the sheet. Gesture. The first. The meaning. He was crying. Is this the beginning of recovery? He asked Estella. This is the beginning of a comeback, she said. The rest is not for us to decide. Now he knew. In the center were not the graphs, not the percentages. In the center was a little girl, sitting on a blanket, trying to take her first step. The first truly warm days came to Eduardo's house almost unnoticed. The garden, recently trimmed to the millimeter and sterilely correct, now blossomed in a wild living disorder. Mint climbed over the edges of the paths. Lemon balm spread across the flower beds, as if it wanted to embrace everything around. Guac bushes reached for the sun without asking permission. This natural freedom drove Patricia crazy. You don't care about safety, she screamed the day she came to see her daughter. Where is the sterility? Where is the hygiene? She's sitting on the ground next to the bees. With that, boy, you didn't even check him. She stood up on her own for the first time in 2 years and took a step, Eduardo answered quietly. Then lose her completely. Alone. I'm filing the papers. The court will decide which of us can be trusted. And she filed. The process began quickly, almost predatory. Patricia had the right people. Influential lawyers, journalists, psychologists. The headlines in the newspapers screamed, "Billionaire chose a witch instead of doctors." Father went crazy, treatment with herbs and fires. Clinics rejected, shaman at the helm. Public opinion wavered, but for the most part leaned towards the sane mother who wanted to return her daughter to white walls and under the lamps. The court hearings were like a play where the roles had long been assigned. The psychologist hired by Patricia talked about Eduardo's instability, about irrational decisions, about threats to the child's health. He tried to say that Isadora eats, that she smiles, that she walks. But in the courtroom, it sounded like fairy tales, without medical certificates, empty words. At one of the hearings, the judge looked at him wearily over his glasses. Mr. Álvarez, do you really think that soup, grass, and songs around a campfire can replace treatment? Eduardo exhaled. No, Your Honor. I think that it can replace loneliness, and loneliness kills faster than illness. These words spread across the headlines. Some chuckled, some remained silent, and some thought for the first time, but despite everything, it seemed that the decision was predetermined. At that moment, Isadora began to speak. At first, one word, then two. Her voice was quiet, tense, as if each word was being pulled from the depths of sleep. But they were real words, simple, warm. Dad, Lucas, milk, more, sleep, flour. Mom, Eduardo filmed everything. His hands were shaking. He watched the recording dozens of times, as evidence, as hope, as a prayer. But the court refused to accept the recording. Unconvincing, the prosecutor said. It could have been filmed in advance. It could have been edited, manipulated, fraud. Patricia insisted, it's not true, it's acting. They're pumping her full of something. I'll demand an expert opinion. Let a toxicologist testify, and then Estela entered the courtroom. She didn't want it. She avoided publicity, conflicts. But that day she came, gray-haired with a straight back, in simple clothes. She entered the hall where people spoke the language of numbers, indicators, and examinations. I'm not a doctor, she began. Her voice sounded firm, without challenge, but with confidence. And I never pretended to be one. The hall became quiet. She stood as if she herself were a tree, carried by the wind into a strange, cold forest. I don't have a degree, Estela said calmly, standing in the courtroom. But I've done more funerals than any of you, and more miracles than you've ever seen. I don't heal the body, I just live next to it. And he, she nodded at Eduardo, is doing the same for the first time. There was silence, heavy, weighty, too heavy for the record, but important in a human way. The judge sighed. The decision was made 2 days later. Eduardo was not deprived of custody, but was placed under supervision. Regular reports, visits from social services, medical examinations, a temporary ban on unconventional methods. In legal terms, one more step, and he will lose everything. He was sitting in the garden. Isadora was sleeping in a hammock. Next to him, Lucas was pouring dried herbs into boxes. Do you regret that everything turned out this way? The boy asked. No, Eduardo replied. I regret not having understood earlier. Strength is nothing if you are alone. Grandma says adults are afraid to be weak because then you have to love truly. He nodded. He stood up. Not abruptly but confidently. I have not lost. I am just beginning. And I will begin with what I can do not only for her. He wrote at night. He looked for people. He drew up the charter. He could not win the court, but he could create something more. An alternative for those who, like him, found themselves beyond the line. A foundation. It was named after his daughter, Isadora. The principle was simple. Free assistance to families whose children were left outside the system. Not instead of hospitals, but together with them, so that at least someone would come and just sit next to them. This is a utopia, said the former partners. This is PR, hinted the journalist. It's me, he answered calmly. One day, Isadora went out into the garden, alone. Not in a stroller, not accompanied by a physiotherapist. In a light dress, with a thin braid, holding on to the wall of the house with one hand. She was in no hurry. She was learning to be. Eduardo froze on the porch. His heart was pounding like in negotiations where the stakes are millions. Only now there was only one stake. Life. Daddy, she said. Clearly. Clearly. And she smiled. He didn't answer. He simply knelt down and opened his arms. She came up and hugged him. It was not just a gesture. It was an oath. The Isadora Foundation began modestly. One office, a coordinator, a doctor, and one herbalist. Yes, Estela agreed. Not as a specialist, unofficially, just as a person who knows how to be there. She had no diplomas, but she had a gift, and the hearts felt it. Lucas came every day after school, packed herbs, drew leaflets, kept a list of requests. His badge said, Assistant Coordinator. But everyone knew he was the son Eduardo found behind the fence. Or maybe the opposite, Lucas found the father. At first, the foundation was ridiculed. Then, they started talking about it. And after 6 months, hundreds began to come there. Those to whom doctors said, Nothing can be done. Those who balance between hope and fatigue, they came for a word, for soup, for silence, for a person who was simply nearby. Eduardo no longer lived in the mansion. He sold it. He left only the garden, the same one where Isadora took her first step, and where life, in spite of everything, took root again. Now, in place of the former pavilion, there was a wooden structure with open windows. There, children slept on blankets, listened to fairy tales, and ate food prepared by Estella. The air was filled with the aroma of herbs, laughter, the rustling of leaves. Eduardo lived simply, without security, without a driver, without haute couture suits. "Are you still a businessman?" his former partner asked him one day, looking in out of curiosity. "No," he answered. "I am a father and a student. My best teacher is an 8-year-old girl who has learned to look into my eyes again." "You lost everything." "I found everything." One day he took Isadora into the garden. Where Lucas had once squeezed through a gap in the fence, there was now a tall tangerine bush. The girl reached out, picked a fruit, and gave it to him. "This is for you." "Thank you," he whispered. Estella stood next to her. "She gave you back not only the taste for life," she said, "but also the ability to feel it." He nodded. "I thought I could buy everything, but it turns out I can only give it away." She smiled. "When I die, don't think of me as a healer. Just plant trees and listen to your daughter." The foundation grew, not quickly, but steadily. People came from other cities. They came without hope and left with it, not because they were being healed, but because they were no longer alone here. Isadora walked again, sometimes quickly, sometimes stumbling. She still spoke little, but her eyes said more than any speech. Sometimes she took Lucas's hand, and they walked through the garden like brother and sister. Sometimes she sat alone on the veranda and wove wreaths of leaves. And Eduardo, he was no longer a hero, no longer a millionaire, no longer a strategist. He simply was, lived, breathed, listened, helped, and every time a new family with a sick child came into the garden, he was the first to go out to greet them. "Welcome," he said. "They don't treat here. They live here. They're here side by side." On the last day of spring, at dawn, he saw Isadora approach a small bush in the corner of the garden, the very same one, the first one he had planted himself. She sat down, put her hand on the ground and whispered, "Grow. You are so needed." And then he realized everything that needed to be saved had already been saved.